Today we're talking about unsolved codes, and I will have more information about some of these codes in more depth in the book that I wrote in 2023. This was the expanded edition of my code breaking book that came out in England. This was co-written with Klaus Schmidt, who's one of the big crypto bloggers in the world. And we're going to be talking just about 5 of these unsolved codes. I generally have to rework this talk every time I give it because one of the codes that was unsolved gets solved. So in that case, the code I was talking about unsolved was the silk dress cryptogram. It has since been solved. So I will be talking to you about what it says and how it was solved. And then I'll be talking about 4 other codes that so far, to my knowledge, are still unsolved. Cryptos at the bottom is actually the artist is going to be putting that final unsolved part up for auction. And I'll be talking to you a bit about that, about what's happening with that one. So the silk dress cryptogram solved. So we go to the area around Washington, D.C., and Sarah Rivers Kofeld, and she's a curator at one of the museums there in St. Leonard. And she loves collecting antique costumes. So she ran into this costume. It's a mid-1880s 2-piece bustle dress, and she purchased it in 2013. And while she was inspecting the dress, she found that there was a hidden pocket. Cliffhanger. Shall I keep talking? No, it's still there. I heard it. Nope, it's still there. Okay. Testing. Modern major general. Okay. I am very model of the modern major general. I'm information venture the tool. Animal and mineral. I quote try the other night. Okay. Good spot under the books. Can someone help me, please? Okay, thank you. Okay. All right. Testing. Modern major general. Kings of England. I just no. Yeah, I hear the feedback coming. Yeah. I can get I can just keep it back here. Just before you told me to get up real close to the mic. Hi. Our audio-visual guy and cosplay medic and audio-visual medic. Okay, yep, I'll keep talking. 2-piece bustle dress. Yeah. Peter Piper picked pickled peppers and seashells. It's still there by the seashore. Yeah. Okay. All right. Where should I be in relation to this microphone?
That should be good.
I mean, I can turn it.
If you get it closer to you, I can face it. Yeah.
All right.
It's better.
You want closer? Okay. Can you guys hear me in the back, by the way? Yeah. Okay, good. All right. Mid 1880s 2-piece bustle dress. Okay. All right. I'll keep going until somebody screams. All right. So, as she was inspecting the dress, she found a hidden pocket. And in the hidden pocket were 2 crumpled up pieces of paper with a whole bunch of words on them. I'll show you what it was in print there. And you can see that the words don't seem to make a lot of sense. And there were numbers in between the lines, and sometimes there were words after the numbers. And it seems to be some sort of a code. If we dig into it a little closer, for example, at the very top there, it says Smith Rostrum Linnet Get None Event. And so they're words, they're clearly words, but they don't seem to form an actual message. And these numbers tend to be the counts of the number of words that are there. And this went up in the cryptology community, people taking a look at it. It looks like something that was encrypted, maybe like a telegram that was encrypted with a code book. This was commonly done in the early days of telegrams because they were charging by the word. So they'd come up with one word that meant a whole bunch of other words. And so there were code books specifically to do that. But we looked at our Telegram code books. We couldn't tell. There are occasionally times that are written, so like 11:13 p.m. Here's another one where it says 11:24 p.m. So probably the only way to solve this, our guess at the time, was to find the code book. And somebody found the code book. So this was in early 2023, Wayne Chan, and he examined 170 code books trying to find which one might have been the right fit. And then he didn't find the code book, but he ran across a book from 1880 called Telegraphic Tales and Telegraphic History. And in that book, there was a mention of these things called weather code books. And so he started searching through weather code books, and he found the one which was the July 1st, 1887 United States Signal Service Weather Code. So if you see over here on the left, where there's that box that I have there where it says Bismarck, omit, leafage, buck, and bank. And what it was is that each one of those was a code for what you see on the right there. So Bismarck was for the area. Bismarck in the Dakota Territory at the time. In modern days, it's in North Dakota. And omit at the time was a code for air temperature being around 56 degrees Fahrenheit, and then also barometric pressure and dew point and the observation time and so forth. So that's what these papers were. In this case, the Bismarck omit leafage buck bank translated to the weather report for Bismarck. 56 degrees Fahrenheit, barometric pressure 30.08 inches of mercury, a dew point of 32 degrees Fahrenheit, clear and dry weather, and a wind speed of 12 miles per hour. And the way they did it is they would have weather stations all around the country that at a certain time would start generating their telegram codes for what the weather was. And another advantage to using words instead of numbers is because by telegram, if you're saying 56, it's really easy to make a typo and go 55 or 57, or whoever is doing the telegram just doesn't understand it properly. But when you have words, it's much more likely to be understood and also to be transmitted correctly. All right, on to the next one. Edward Elgar's Dorabella cipher. Edward Elgar, very famous composer. I'm sure you've all heard his music. His most famous piece is Pomp and Circumstance. So if you've been to a graduation ceremony, you've heard that piece, which is a smaller part of one of his larger pieces. And he was from Worcester, England, right, born in 1857. He had a strong interest in puzzles and encryption. And he wrote one famous piece called the Enigma Variations. And in the Enigma Variations, he had 14 different movements, and each movement referred to someone else in his circle in some way. For example, if there was someone that he went fishing with, there might be something in the movement that sounded like the sound of water that was rippling. Or if someone had a certain kind of laugh at a certain pattern, he would put something in the music that would be sort of the sound of that person's laughter. And one of those people, number 10, was Dorabella. This was Dora Penny. She was a young woman who was part of his extended circle that he'd meet every so often, or when he traveled with several people, she would often be one of the people that was traveled in this kind of upper crust community. And at one point, his family had stayed with her family for a vacation. And afterwards, his wife was sending a message to them saying, thank you very much for allowing us to stay with you. And he included a small message with that thank you note to Dora with a encrypted message on it. And this is what it looked like. Right? And I'll blow it up so it's larger. And he sent this at the very bottom. It says July 14th, 1897, July 14th, 97. All right. And she couldn't crack it. She had no idea what it said. So she dropped it in a drawer and went on with her life. And then after his death, and when she became much older, she wrote an autobiography because people were very interested in her association with this very famous composer, Edward Elgar. And so she wrote it, calling it Edward Elgar Memories of a Variation, since she was one of the variations in his Enigma Variation. So she wrote this in 1937, and there was an appendix in it where she included this code saying, can someone please tell me what it says? I'd be most interested to know what it says. And no one could solve it. So it's been over, well, since it was written, over 100 years at this point, and it's one of the most famous unsolved codes in the world. People have been looking at it forward and sideways, and does it refer to music? Do the things need to be rotated in a certain direction? We have found one of his notebooks that has these same symbols in it, and we know what something written in some of these symbols might mean, but we've tried applying these symbols to the Dorabella cryptogram. We still don't know what it says. And we've tried, again, going forward and backwards and sideways. If we were to decrypt the Dorabella cryptogram against this alphabet that was in his notebook, it would look like this. So doesn't seem to really say anything. And again, we're not sure where the word endings are, so that makes it, we kind of have to guess. In this case, we kind of put them in groups of 5, which is very common when we're trying to decrypt a code, or when a code is being sent, it's often sent in groups of 5. Don't know what it says. We've tried doing frequency analysis on it, and we've tried transcribing it in different ways so we can see what are the most frequent symbols that are there. And it does sort of look like an English frequency chart. There's a clear most frequent symbol, which in this case, and if we do it this way with the transcript, is a J. And so could that J possibly be an E? And we just played with it again, twisted it this way and that way. And a lot of people have looked at this, a lot of people, both college educated code crackers and hobbyists, amateur. About once a year or so, we get an amateur come forward and say, I've solved it. And we say, oh yeah, show us. And usually what they've done is they've kind of dumped all these letters out on a table like a Scrabble set. And then they take the letters that spell something out and ignore all the rest of the letters and say, I've solved it. And we go, no, don't. And they say, oh, but I'm not going to tell you the full answer until I've announced it to the press. And we go, don't do that. And then they say, and we want to announce it to the Elgar group. And we go, the Elgar group is not cryptographers. They are people that are interested in music. They're not going to know forward or backward what this says. And they say, and I've written a book about it. No, don't do it. And we can't convince them otherwise. And they go forward and they publish the book, and the people in the cryptography community look at the book and they rip it. They rip it a new one because it's wrong. It's not the answer. And the person gets very embarrassed, and we go, we tried to tell you, don't do it. And so I actually have a nice autographed book by one of these people. It's wrong, but and he did find a couple things. One is that he actually went and he found where Dorabella's grave is, and it was in kind of this side of a church cemetery, and it was kind of overgrown. But he cleaned it up, and he told the groundskeeper about it. And now there's a nice little plaque there in the church saying this is where Dora Penny is buried. And so that's nice that he found that. But he's still very embarrassed. Very embarrassed about the book. So I think I told you that didn't work, and other things we've tried. We've tried just doing some word guessing, which is difficult. We don't have spaces. We tried the hill climbing method, which I talked about earlier in DragonCon. That hasn't gotten us anywhere. It might give us words, but the words don't mean anything. P.S. now drew beige weeds. Well, yeah, it's English, sort of. And we've tried AI. No, haven't come up with anything better than that. So why do these things fail? Well, maybe it's not a letter substitution where we're just substituting for A, B, C, D, E. Maybe it's meant to be something else. It could be Morse code. It could be musical notes. Maybe he made mistakes, and that's very common in creating code. Someone, and I've done it myself, where I write plain text and then I transcribe it into ciphertext. I put it up on the whiteboard, And then my class or whoever is cracking it and someone comes up and goes, did you know? I'm like, yeah, and I'm horrified because I made some big mistake when I wrote the code. So it happens. So maybe it's got some sort of mistakes in it. Maybe he intended it as a hoax, but that he would write something like this to send as a hoax to someone in his circle is unlikely. We know that he and she would talk about all kinds of different things, horse racing and gardens, and they probably talked about codes as well, but she wasn't a serious cryptographer. It wasn't something that she'd studied. So I think it's very unlikely to be a hoax. Maybe it has an unusual plain text, like this plain text, do you go to London tomorrow? It sounds like English, but notice it doesn't have any E's in it. It has O's and it has a U, but there's no E's or A's or I's. So if you were going to try and use frequency analysis on this, it would be really tricky because of the way that the letters are organized, their frequency. And one other thing that's come to my attention, I'm sure some of the other people studying it have known this for a while, is there are some dots. And around the 4, there's 2 dots, and there's 1 dot that's in around one of the squiggles there. And I'm going to go back here 1. So looking at it this way, you see there's 2 dots next to the 4 and 1 at one of the squiggles. So they look to be deliberate. But what could they mean? Are they relevant? Probably. Maybe they mean you have to rotate it this way and rotate it that way, or do something vertically. We don't know. So this continues to be one of the most famous unsolved codes in the world. Okay. All right, now we're going to go just a few more years forward to World War II. This is the pigeon cryptogram. So we're going around D-Day. And this is, so we're going to keep in mind in Surrey, this is after World War II, there was this man who was cleaning his chimney. And as he was cleaning his chimney, he found the bones of a pigeon in the chimney. And then he realized that this was a carrier pigeon that he had found. And the carrier pigeon still had a message attached to its leg. And the message was still readable. So he brought this to the newspapers in 1982, or he found it in 1982, and then it was brought to public attention in 2012. So a lot of cryptographer attention went on this. The message is in code. Can it be solved? So a little bit more about carrier pigeons in World War II. Hundreds of thousands of pigeons were used to send messages not just back to England, but also in between different countries. And I was confused about that. I'm like, so if the pigeon is raised in England, how does it know to go back to Western France, which is not its home? And what I learned is that they would have mobile pigeon lofts. So they would raise the pigeon in a loft, say in England, and this loft would be something that could be transported on wheels or in some other way. And so they take the loft to France, and then they would spend a few weeks getting the pigeon used to the idea that its home loft was now in France. They'd let it go not too far away and get it back, and then farther away and farther away. And when they knew that it was reliably returning to this mobile loft, then they could take it to Germany or someplace much farther away and release it, and they would know that it was going to go back to that loft instead of going back to England. And so hundreds of thousands, and the term in British English is, they say the pigeons were seconded, which would mean that they were assigned as a second assignment to do war duty. And pigeons were actually given medals. There was this medal called the Dickon Medal that was given to animals in the various wars. It was given to dogs and horses and cats and pigeons. There were 32 pigeons that received the Dickon Medal. And some of these pigeons, the stories about them are phenomenal because they're sent and they're being fired at, but also there are falcons that were being sent up in the air trying to catch these pigeons as they were going by. And so these pigeons, they would get injured, and a couple of these pigeons would keep going because they had to get back to the loft. And so some of these pigeons received the medals and actually went back into duty and continued carrying messages back and forth. So there are some remarkable stories. Some of the pigeons, when they were done with war duty, were then allowed to relax for the rest of their lives. None of them, I'm surprised, were put out to stud, so to speak. You've got these great pigeons, are they going to then breed eggs of great pigeons from there? And I was told no, because generally pigeons, when they're breeding, they generally do it at a younger age. I don't know a whole lot about pigeon breeding, but that's what I was told. And a couple of the pigeons, this might or might not be considered a great honor, were stuffed. So here we have one of the pigeons that was stuffed, and it's on a pedestal, and the medal is there. I think this one is at the Smithsonian now. I'm not sure. I need to find that out, but at least two of them were stuffed. All right, so here's the message now that was found on this pigeon slate that was in the chimney. It was probably sent on D-Day, so that would have been June 6th, 1944. Okay. The fact that the canister there was red meant that it was either used by the United States forces or by the British Army. All right. This 2 address up there, X05, I think, is to Royal Air Force Bomber Command in High Wycombe, probably. Again, there's a lot of people who know it doesn't mean that, it means something else, because we don't really have a strict address. But when I've shown this slide to people who are retired military, they go, oh yeah, that's RAF Bomber Command. I'm like, okay, I'll take it. And here we have the pigeon identifiers. So we have the NURP, N-U-R-P, which meant the National Union of Racing Pigeons. So these pigeons were being raised to be fast pigeons. And the 40 would mean the banding year, probably the year that the pigeon was born. So 1940 in this case, in 1937. Then we have TW and DK, probably, well, certainly the original homes of the pigeons. Now, what TW means and what DK means, again, there's some speculation on that. I'll show you on the next slide. And then the numbers. So once we know it was born in 1940 and whatever the TWs, it was pigeon number 194 in that particular year, that grouping, and the other one was pigeon 76. So these messages were generally written in duplicate and sent by 2 pigeons, hoping that if one didn't make it, the other one would get through. Right, so High Wycombe, in this case, was northwest of London, and I've already shown you Surrey. Now, the big code-breaking group in England was at Bletchley Park. Has anyone been to Bletchley Park? If you go to England, go to Bletchley Park. They have an amazing museum, very well done, very interesting. And so we don't think the pigeon was going to Bletchley. We think it was going to one of the other 2 places. So TW probably meant either Twickenham or Tunbridge Wells. And the DK almost certainly meant Dorking. We don't know of any other pigeon homes that would fit that DK anachronism there, initialism. So it was sent from Normandy. And so at the end of the message, we have 1525/6. The 6 would have been the day of the month, which is why we think it was June 6th, D-Day. And at the bottom, we have 1522. This was the time that the form was filled in. And the 1525 up there next to the 6 is the time of the message being created. So we have the form being filled in at 1522, created at 1525, and on the 6th. And then we have one more, 2 copies. I told you about that. And at the bottom, you see Libre 1625. That would have been libre, the French word for freed, at 425. So all of this with the numbers of the pigeons was probably a different handwriting. So whoever was sending the message didn't carry the pigeon in with them. They might have been a paratrooper that came in and then was met with people from the resistance who said, here's a pigeon if you have a message that you want to send back. And so who sent it? A lot of speculation on this. It sort of looks like W. Sergeant. So SJT would have been probably Sergeant, but then W. Stitt. There was a paratrooper, Sergeant William Stott, 27 years old, who was there parachuted into occupied Normandy on reconnaissance mission, but it could have also been W. Stott with 1 T or Stout. If you go to the GCHQ website, which is their version of the NSA, they say on their website, we don't know who it was. When I give this talk to people who are retired military, they go, yes, it was this person. So we don't know for sure. You can go on the internet and Google all kinds of the different crypto blogs and get lots of arguments going on about who exactly the person was. So let me see. About the code, what do we know? There's the number 27 there. There are 27 groups of 5 letters here in the code. So that's like a checksum of what's there. And we know that one of the groups is identical, AOAKN. It's at the beginning, also way up at the end. So maybe it's a key of some sort. We don't know. So which encryption system might have been used? Well, maybe it was a manual cipher of some sort. Maybe it was a code book. Maybe it was an encryption machine. There were encryption machines that were small enough. They weren't like the big Enigma machines, but there were some that were small enough that they could have been transported around. It might have been what's called a one-time pad, which means that you have to have 2 pads that are identical, and you use the key that's on the pad, you rip it off, you throw it away, you never use it again, and then whoever's decrypting has the same pad, they decrypt it, rip it off, never use it again. So that AOAKN may have been used the page in the one-time pad that starts with AOAKN. Okay. All right. When I say code book, it's also possible that it was a code book that no longer exists because different groups had code books specifically for their use. Maybe it used one of those. We don't know. If it were a cipher machine, we don't even know what kind of machine it might have been. That M2A9 is a small machine with a thumb. You do something and you press the thing with the thumb and go to the next. Someone might have carried that in and used that. The RockX from 1943, it's a big machine, but maybe there was an area there that had a big machine. So there's just so many speculations and no one has really come up with an answer for it. There's a lot of people working on it and it continues to be one of the most famous unsolved codes in the world. Okay. Now we're going to go to something back in the 19th century, and I've told you about these great codes with heroism and history, and this is not one of them. This one is fraud. This one is fraud, plain and simple. There was an Irishman who was selling snake oil, saying that it was created by this Chinese herbalist named Gunhua. And we know that in the Denver Times, July 23rd, 1889, there was this, looks like an encrypted message printed in the paper, signed by Gunhua at 1629 Larimer Street. And it's an unsolved code. We don't know what it says. We do know that there was a company in the 19th century that was an American company called Gunhua. And we do know that Larimer Street is a real street in Denver. Anyone here from Denver? Oh, okay. So you may be able to help me with part of this. So in this, the Gunhua company, as I said, is a fake Chinese doctor, and the company was created by a handful of businessmen that sold, let's say, doubtful remedies. And that there was a Denver branch that existed from 1888 to 1894, founded by the Irish immigrant William Hale. So I've been looking for a picture of that street front on Larimer Street. I've found 3 of these images so far. I don't think these have the exact address. They might, but if anyone here is from Denver, that could maybe find me a better picture of that particular address from around that time. That would be awesome. So here we have a rough timeline. So Irish immigrant Hale founds the Denver branch of Gunhua, because there's more than one branch. I'll get to that. And in 1889, somebody creates this advertisement in the Denver Times. And a couple of years later, Hale was arrested, and 1894, he escaped, he went to Europe, and then he came back for some dumb reason, and he was arrested again, and he was put into prison. That's about all we know about Hale. You can see at the bottom, it doesn't show up really well, but this
glass bottle, says Gunwa's Chinese remedy. So what was the purpose of this cryptogram? At first we were wondering, was it kind of communication in between businesses? We didn't know how much fraud was involved at that time. Now we know a little bit more about what's going on. Now we're wondering, maybe it was some sort of challenge cipher that if you can solve this, and the message would be, now you need to buy a bottle of Gunwa's Chinese remedy in order to proceed. But there's also an idea that it could have been a postage stamp scam. I'll go into that in a minute. We do know that it showed up at least 50 times in the Denver Times and in other Denver newspapers. So when we take a look at it, it's 77 letters. We look at the frequency chart. We do what's called an index of coincidence on it, which is 4.1%. English is normally 6.7%, so we don't know if that really tells us anything. It's probably not a transposition, probably not monoalphabetic. Some people have suspected that it could be what's called a period 5 polyalphabetic cipher. I won't go into detail on that. But we did find other Gunwa stories that were showing up. So this one showed up and it offered a $500 reward. And if you look at the capital letters down here at the bottom, it sort of looks like a code, but then you realize that the spaces are rearranged. So where it starts with AF and the next word is TERAL, that actually means after. And so you can get the whole message after all others fail. Gunwa cured me. Call or send to him if suffering, and he will do the same by you with his Chinese remedies. So in the text part of this, they're saying, it's actually ironic, they're saying a miner was found dead, and this message, when it was in his effects, I'm thinking, okay, a dead man is advertising a Chinese remedy. I don't know about that. And he said that, and there's a little bit about the Beale cipher, but they're saying something about how he had a lot of money and we're not sure where that money is today. And that captures imagination. A lot of money that no one's found. So the $500 reward aside is like, treasure. And so that draws people in where they want to solve this. And it's like advertising. It gets the name Gunwa out into the public or out into people's brains. So this showed up December 5th, 1889, which is a little after when the first one showed up. The contact is interesting. Mrs. Mary P. Unwell, Leadville, Colorado. So Leadville is a real town, but Unwell is not a common American name. So maybe there's Mrs. Mary Punwell, maybe. Yeah. We're wondering if that too is some sort of grouping of the letters. If someone can see something else there, come on up, tell me about it. Let me see. Other Gunwa puzzles, and many of these were related not to Leadville, but to that Larimer Street address. So that's how we're finding these. We're searching what has a Larimer Street address. Then there was this one, which was a lot harder, had to do with a grid system. And that was published in 1890 in the Rocky Mountain News, and the answer was published February 2nd. I won't go into great details on it, but it did come out to an English sentence that again was advertising Gunwa. So going back to that original 1889, we don't know what it says, and it remains, broad that it is, one of the most famous unsolved codes in the world. Right? On to the next one. This is one of my favorites. Kryptos. Kryptos is a sculpture at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, and it has an encrypted inscription on it. Langley is just outside of Washington, D.C. This is an overhead view of CIA headquarters. On the right-hand side was their original headquarters building, which they were outgrowing. And on the left, they built a new headquarters building. And that white building in the center with the funny shaped roof, that is the cafeteria. The cafeteria has a big glass window looking out onto that green landscaped courtyard, and that is where Kryptos is. that was designed by an artist named Jim Sanborn, and it was commissioned in 1988 and dedicated in 1990. The person who designed the codes that are on Cryptos was a CIA employee named Ed Scheit. And he was teamed with Sanborn by William Webster, who was the director of the CIA at the time. You may have seen his name in the news, or he just passed away recently at the age of 102 or something. But Webster teamed Scheit with Sanborn, and Ed, the Sanborn didn't know anything about codes at the time, and Ed taught Sanborn about some codes, and then Sanborn created the actual messages. So here I am with Scheit on the right and Sanborn on the left. He's a big, tall guy. And when I heard about this, I heard about it because of another code that I was working on called the Freaknik code, which I had heard about because of DragonCon. Okay. So when I first started coming to DragonCon, I was invited to speak about computer games. That's my main gig, is creating computer games. And while I was here, I wanted to go to a whole bunch of other talks, and I heard about these computer security talks at the early version of the Electronic Frontiers Forum, even before Scott was the director. That's how far this goes back. And there were hackers that were coming in, and they were speaking about computer security, about how people should lock up their computers so that hackers couldn't get in. These were the white hat guys. And then I started speaking about computer games at DragonCon. And at the end of the day, the speakers, we get together and we have a beer and kind of hang out. And through the hackers, I heard about this code called the Freaknik 3 code, which had been released at a Nashville hacker convention. It was the third run of it, so Freaknik 3. And they said this code had been out for a year, but no one cracked it yet. And I'm like, okay. And I picked up all the flyers and stuff that you get at a convention. And I took it home with me to St. Louis, where I was living at the time. And then I just got really obsessed with it and cracked it. And it took me about 10 days, but I cracked it. And then I went around cracking a bunch of other codes in the hacker scene. I actually cracked so many I was banned from competition. The Atlanticon Hacker Convention, when they released their code, it was on a sheet of paper, and at the bottom it said, note, past puzzle solvers are ineligible for prizes associated with the Atlanticon puzzle. Give someone else a chance. So I cracked that one too. And when I was working on the Freaknik 3 code, it had some dead ends, some red herrings in it. And one of them was go to this website. So I'm like, okay, it's like an onion. So I'm going through layer after layer after layer. And I get to this part and it says, okay, go to this website. And it was the CIA.gov website. I'm like, okay. And it was a page on the website with a picture of Cryptos, which had just been in the news a couple of years before that. And it said, okay, for the next part of the Freaknik 3 code, go solve this. I'm like, okay. Because what we knew about it at that point is there were 4 codes on Cryptos. Show you the picture. That on the right-hand side, we have what's called the visionary tableaus. You see these lovely diagonals. It's alphabets that are shifted by one. And on the left, we have 4 codes. 3 of the 4 have just been solved in 1992. And I may have the year wrong on that, but they had just been solved. And the 4th part had not been solved yet. It was one of the most famous unsolved codes in the world. So the first 3 parts, I'll tell you a little bit more. First part says between subtle shading and the absence of light lies the nuance of occlusion, typo there. And then the second part was totally invisible. How is that possible? They used the Earth's magnetic field. The information was gathered and transmitted underground to an unknown location. Does Langley know about this? They should. It's buried out there somewhere. Who knows the exact location? Only WW. This was his last message, 38 degrees, 57 minutes, 6.5 seconds north, 77 degrees, 8 minutes, 44 seconds west, X layer 2. And then part 3, slowly, desperately slowly, the remains of passage debris that encumbered the lower part of the doorway was removed with trembling hands. I made a tiny breach in the upper left-hand corner, and then, widening the hole a little, I inserted the candle and peered in. The hot air escaping from the chamber caused the flame to flicker, but presently details of the room within emerged from the mist. X, can you see anything? Q. Who recognizes that?
Keep that from the.
Pyramid guy.
The pyramid guy, yeah. That was a paraphrased extract from the diary of archaeologist Howard Carter on the day that he discovered King Tut's tomb, which was in the Valley of the Kings, a little south of the pyramids. So Sanborn has said he chose these because he likened solving a code to wiping away the layers to see the message come through. And there's other parts, I won't go into huge detail on it. And then there's part 4, unsolved. We don't know what it says. We know that Sanborn has given some hints because we're going on 35 years now and it still hasn't been solved. We know that the word Berlin appears. He gave this clue in 2010. And when that was released, it made international news, especially in the German papers. Why is the word Berlin encrypted onto the sculpture in the middle of CIA headquarters? Then we have the word clock, which also got a lot of attention because there are several very interesting clocks in Berlin. Then in January 2020, right before the pandemic started, we have the word Northeast. And then the pandemic started and Sanborn was bored and he wanted to stir things up a little. So he gave one more hint to just someone in email. And he wanted to see how long until it percolated up to where someone like me would hear about it. And I did. And I called his listen and he says, yeah. So we published that in August of 2020. Again, the word East. So we have a good chunk of the plain text of part 4. Still don't know what it says. So Kryptos is famous. It was mentioned in the book jacket of Dan Brown's book, The Da Vinci Code. And in his sequel to that, The Lost Symbol, which has anyone here read The Lost Symbol? Yeah, not as famous now as it used to be. But it takes place in Washington, D.C. It features Kryptos as an element in the book and Freemasons. It was published in 2009. And in the book, there is a CIA character named Nola K, which Dan Brown named after me. Because I helped him with the book. He called me up and he said, I'm going to do something with Kryptos. Can I ask you some stuff? I'm like, sure, fine. I didn't know who he was. I'm a helpful kind of person. And he would ask me questions. He asked me some questions like, which pyramid was King Tutankhamun buried in? And I'm like, was he buried in a pyramid, Valley of Kings? And I'm like, oh, so I think I saved him from a huge mistake. So he named a character for me in the book. So that was really exciting when I saw that. So why hasn't this 4th part been solved yet, K4? Well, it's short. It's just 97 characters. So it's very difficult to find patterns in something that's that short. It's possible that there's a key that is on CIA grounds that we need that we don't have access to. Kryptos was never intended as a public challenge. It was intended as a challenge to the employees at the CIA. The first person to crack those first 3 parts was Jim Galogly in around the year 2000. And then the CIA came forward and said, well, we've got somebody that has solved those three parts as well, who's an internal analyst named David Stein. And then the NSA came forward and said, well, we have people that have solved it too, but we're not going to tell you who, and we're not going to tell you when, which is very NSA. The joke is it stands for no such agency. Right. Now we know who, and I've actually talked to a couple people, and they say, yeah, we couldn't solve that fourth part. I did, by the way, file a Freedom of Information Act request on the NSA saying, I want to see your notes. And they said, well, it's classified. And I'm like, this is a recreational cipher that has nothing to do with national security. I want to see your notes. And this went back and forth for years. And then finally, I got a big, thick envelope in the mail that was a bunch of stuff redacted, but I got their notes. So cryptos, maybe we missed something, maybe we've been misdirected, maybe it doesn't have the word Berlin in it, we don't know. And maybe he made a mistake, we don't know. So last time I gave this talk, I said, okay, unsolved crypto mystery. But maybe it's not going to be unsolved for too much longer because I was actually on vacation in Europe over the summer and I went down to Morocco and I was coming back across the Straits of Gibraltar. And my phone rang, this very phone in this very case. And I saw it's Jim Sanborn. And I debated not answering vacation and all this. I'm like, I should answer it. And he said, hi, what you doing? I'm like, well, there goes the Rock of Gibraltar. I'm passing it right now. And he said that he was thinking about selling the answer to part 4. And I'm like, okay, can I call you back? Because, bad phone service, all that. So I get back to the States, I call him back, and he tells me that he's going to put the answer to K4 up for auction. And this will be starting on October 17th. And it's all online, and it will finalize on his 80th birthday on November 20th. And he said, basically, he's getting older. He feels his mortality. He says it's been 35 years and it hasn't been cracked yet. He didn't expect it was going to take 35 years. And he gets people contacting him all the time. He gets crazies showing up on his doorstep with 3-ring binders, wanting him to check their solution. And he gets people calling him every single day, and he's tired of it. So one of the auction houses, our auction, had heard about it, and they sent one of their people down to his island. He lives southeast of DC on an island, and they talked him into auctioning it. So I'll show you that. So this is what's being auctioned. The plain text, a photograph, a pamphlet, autographs, coding charts. Now, for me, I don't care what the answer is. I want to know the method so you can go from that ciphertext on the sculpture to the answer. Because I get people contacting me every week saying, I've solved cryptos. So I'm like, okay, tell me your first or last word. Okay, your timestamp. Okay, give me the rest of the answer and your method. Never checks out. Never checks out. But I'm polite. I'm polite. So when he sells this, and they're estimating that it's going to go for between $300,000 and $500,000, because that's what enigmas are going for right now, is between $300,000 and $500,000. Whoever gets it will get the answer. And I'm asking him, will they get the method? And he understands why this is a big deal, because he says he understands that if someone has this and they just say the answer is whatever, and they don't have a method, no one's going to believe them, because they could make up any English sentence they want. He wouldn't even have to say Berlin clock in it. They could make up anything. So he understands why it's important. So I'm saying, will they get the method? And he gets kind of cagey. So we know that it was designed by Ed Scheidt. The method was designed by Ed Scheidt. And then Sanborn, pardon my language, but Sanborn says he fucked with it. And we had a reporter ask him, saying, what do you mean you fucked with it? And Sanborn said, I can't say. So is the method something that can still be solved? Is it solvable? That's my big question. So I hope whoever buys it, which is not going to be me, because I don't have that kind of money. If you guys want to pass around another, bucket, and we'll have a pool, put in a bid for it, that's fine. But whoever buys it, I hope that I can then get in communication with them and say, may I check to see that this is solvable? And I've already talked to the other group moderators. There's 3 of us who are moderating the Cryptos group on groups.io, and said, I am willing to then stand back and no longer have anything to do with cryptos, because I will then be one of the people in the world that knows the answer. And we're still kind of discussing the details of that. I'm pretty good at keeping secrets. I was a game developer for 24 years. I'm pretty good at keeping secrets. But I want to make sure it is solvable. And if so, and with the permission of whoever buys it, I would then go forward to the groups and the others. I know there's thousands of people working on it, and say, yes, it is solvable. And then I'll stand back, because that's the big question right now. Some of the people who've been working on it for many years are actually kind of upset that the answer is being auctioned off, because they want to keep working on it. They want to solve it. They don't want the answer to be announced out there. Others really want to know what it says. So we'll see. We'll see. So unsolved codes, there are many others out there. If you would like to cut your teeth on any of these, there's this great website called Mystery Twister. And they have hundreds of challenges, going from very easy challenges to very difficult challenges. And they can rate them by, this was the last time I went to their website, by all the different levels. So an easy challenge might be something that you could solve pretty quickly, like 1, 2, 3, and X might be some of the world's most famous unsolved codes. So if you want to see them, you can go there. And that's kind of it. Questions, please come up to the mic.
Could you go back and slide with the name of the website? Okay. Thank you.
Look, I think about this, especially in game design and puzzles. As a game designer and like puzzle person yourself, do you think that there is an easy line between a very difficult puzzle and a puzzle that is just bad?
Is there a difference between a difficult puzzle and a bad puzzle?
Or is there like a line that like?
Oh yeah. And when I train new puzzle designers, the most common mistake they make is they design a puzzle. They think it's obvious, because to them it's obvious because they designed it. And then they want to put it out there. And I like throw myself bodily in front of them saying, no, you need to have someone who's not you test that puzzle to make sure it's solvable, to make sure it's as easy or obvious as you think it is, because that's a bad puzzle that's out there that hasn't been tested properly. A difficult puzzle is one that has been tested and the testers are going, woo, boy, that's a difficult puzzle. So another group I work with is the MIT Mystery Hunt. They do a big thing once a year. And whichever group wins it each year then has to design the puzzles for the following year. So I was on one of the winning groups and we were designing, and I saw the testing process that they went through because they wanted everything to be solvable. Okay, if it's hard, but they wanted everything to be solvable. So all the ones at the MIT, I would say, are good puzzles, just hard puzzles. Okay,
Thank you.
sure.
Are there tests for solvability, like, I think with the cryptos thing? Let's imagine you get the method and now you know it. You just have it in front of you. Once you know it, I feel like it's easy to have a bias because you already know it.
Mhm.
Are there tests you can run that show the solvability without having already seen the answer? If that makes any sense.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's a great question. And with game development, I'm really good at putting myself into the frame of mind of a new user, a brand new user, and thinking the way a new user would think and saying, especially when we're doing iPad things and think, oh, it's obvious that someone's going to tap here or here or here. And I'm like, I don't know. And we put it in front of testers and they'd be like tapping on the far side of the screen because they don't, their thought process is going to be different from the thought process of whoever's actually creating it. So yes, I think I would be able to go through the steps of saying, once I know the method, this is how you get from A to B. Can you get from B to A? I think I'd be able to do that, yeah.
I have a really simple question.
Sure.
In terms of the crypto community or you yourself, do you think the Beal cipher is BS or what?
Okay, the Beal ciphers pamphlet published in the late 1800s has 3 messages. One of them solved with the Declaration of Independence. The other 2 haven't been solved yet. So we're in sync, right? And was probably the inspiration for some of the Nicolas Cage movies. It depends what day you ask me, but in general, I think it was created as a scam to sell pamphlets.
Thank you. That's it. That's all I wanted to know.
Okay. Right?
That's all.
With code breaking, how much of your work do you think is like logical progression and how much of it is guess and check?
With code breaking, I would say 50-50. Even the most experienced code breakers are going to use guesswork. You have to. You have to, because you don't know. Someone designed it hoping that you didn't know. So yeah, you're going to be guessing.
I imagine that LLMs would be pretty useless for this sort of
Wait,
thing.
can you tilt the microphone?
I imagine that LLMs, ChatGPT would be pretty useless for this sort of thing. You don't want to lose, tried or have any success.
LLMs, large language models, otherwise known as AI, ChatGPT, Grok, Claude, Gemini, et cetera, et cetera. I spend a lot of time talking to ChatGPT, ChatGPT-4, ChatGPT-5. We talk about everything from philosophy to codes to humor. It has a wicked sense of humor if you get it going. With cryptos is what I would use to make them chase their tail. I would ask them to try and solve cryptos, and it was clear they had no idea what they were doing. The main thing about these LLMs is they are designed to please you. When you ask a question, they want to fill in the answer for you. If they don't know the answer, they will make something up. That's about this whole hallucination aspect. So they suck at code breaking because they tell you what they think the answer might be, and it's not. With GPT-5, it's not hallucinating as much, but it's still hallucinating. Like if I told it, like GPT-4, I'd say, give me an English sentence that's 97 letters long. And it would give me a sentence that was 100 letters long. And I'd say, no, 97. It would give me one that was 93 letters long. It couldn't count. It couldn't generate a sentence that was 97 letters long. With GPT-5, it can give you a sentence that's 97 letters long, but it's still not the answer. And I said, okay, give me an English sentence that's 97 letters long that has the word Berlin here, clock here, northeast there, east there, and it goes into its thinking mode. Right, if you ever see, click where it says thinking, and you can see the process of its thinking. It's pretty interesting. And it would give me an English that made no sense. And even if it could have given me that answer, it wouldn't have had a method from how to go to the ciphertext to that answer. So can LLMs solve codes? I say categorically, they cannot. Yeah. Okay. All right, thank you very much.